Hello and welcome back to the Pioneers Pick'em, where we take a look at this week's high school and college football games. Taking a look back at last week, I led the way with a 9-2 record. I believe Brandon went 8-3. Bob a distant last place at 7-4. Hopefully we can rebound this week. We'll start things off. Baldwin at Coleman. Baldwin coming off a big win last week in double overtime. They take on a 4-2 Coleman team. So Bob, can you give us a little bit of an idea of what to expect from a Baldwin team that seems to be finding their offense right now?
Baldwin is, starting to come into their own. They're a very young team. And with a young team, it takes time to get everything up to speed and kids know where they're going. I think that you're just going to see a continuation of that, and you're going to see progress. I don't think it's going to result in a victory Friday night, but I think you're going to see improvement.
What about you, Brandon? You seeing Baldwin as a team that is getting more confidence as they go along, and how much of a factor is that going to be in this week's game?
Last week's game was very big for Baldwin. A 2 overtime win, and it's really going to help them build upon themselves to get better. This week it's going to be a little bit tougher, and I think they're just going to end up falling behind and then having to play catch up.
All right, next game up, well, we have Bay City John Glenn making a visit to Top Taggart Field for a non-conference contest against Big Rapids. Big Rapids homecoming, they've struggled this year, but you got to imagine that Big Rapids team on its homecoming is definitely going to come out firing on all cylinders. It has been a team that's improved on the defensive side of the ball as the year has gone on. Bob, how is that going to help a Big Rapids team that's struggling to find their offense right now, but things have been going better for them on defense in recent weeks?
Defense is always important. You hear the adage, defenses win championships. They can keep you in games. You don't have a defense. If you have a defense and no offense, you can stay in games and maybe you break the big play. If you don't have an offense and a defense, you're getting blown out every week. So their defense is keeping them in games, and I don't know if it's going to help them this week, but their defense has stepped up and has kept them in games like last week against Chip Hills.
All right, and Brandon, can you talk? You got a chance to check them out against Chip Hills last week. What does Big Rapids have to change offensively to get things going and put some points on the board?
For starters, mental mistakes, penalties, false starts, just get past that mental edge. I mean, they were spectacular on defense. Cody Manicky's interception was really the only big play of that game, and that resulted in Chip Hills winning. Big Rapids is emotional, and they fight hard every play, every down. It's going to be tough against a team that averages 33 points a game, though.
This game we're looking at Lake City at Everett. Lake City, it kind of continues the trend of Everett playing some of the top teams, not only in the area, but in the state for their division. Lake City's a team that beat Beale City last week, who is well known as a state power. So looking at this game, how does Everett keep it close after having a tough game last week against McBain? Bob, what did they need to do? What did the Wildcats need to do to keep this game competitive?
I think they have to do what they've done all year, and that is to run the football. Run the football, keep the ball obviously away from the opponents. That's what they couldn't do last week against McBain, and subsequently they lost 39-0. They have to run the football, win the time of possession battle. If they do that, they have a shot at beating Lake City.
And Brandon, this isn't a bad Everett football team. They've won 3 football games this year. How do you keep, if you're the coach of Everett, you're Pat Craven, how do you keep these kids, motivated to, if they fall behind in a game against Lake City, which, is a possibility?
Coach Craven has to pinpoint and tell his team that they are successful in certain things, like running the ball, like Bob said. And he's got to point to those successes, and they can build upon them. It's going to be a tough game, though. That's the thing.
Manton against Crossroads is the next game we're looking at. Crossroads continues to struggle to find itself on offense. Did have some success in the second half last week against Onekama. But they have Manton this week, a team that's also a little bit down this year. So Bob, I got to ask you: is Crossroads stand a chance this week against a Manton team that has struggled a little bit?
The short answer is no. I think Coach Thorne said it last week when Onekama basically brought in their JV team. Hey, we were able to play even with them against the JV team. Manton's not going to be bringing the JV team here. It's going to be a tough road for Crossroads Friday night.
Brandon, looking at this game, Crossroads was able to move the ball in the second half. If you're Jeff Thorne, is that something that you point to when you're breaking down film and you're looking at Manton, is to try to give these guys a little bit more confidence?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you got to build up confidence in your players, and pinpointing that and highlighting that and telling those players that they can be successful. That's going to be key. Whether or not it results in points or even a win is another story.
Next game we're taking a look at is Pine River at Marion. Pine River continuing to struggle to find offense. They lost a heartbreaking game last week. Marion, a team pretty much on the same level as Pine River, searching for an identity a little bit. Bob, is this the week that Pine River gets back on track and gets back into winning some football games?
For their sake, it better be. They don't have many winnable games on their schedule remaining. Marion isn't very good. Teams have taken a good run at them and beaten them up pretty good. And Pine River actually has played pretty well this year. They just can't finish drives. They're not coming up with the key plays at the key time. And I think this is the week they get their win, or another win.
What about you, Brandon? Do you agree? Is this the week that the Bucks get back into the win column?
I think it's a week to fear the deer. I really do.
Our next game is Reed City at Chippewa Hills. Reed City, another big game, another big win for the Coyotes. They have all but sewn up the CSAA championship, but they've got one more huge roadblock in the way. That comes at Chippewa Hills this week, a team that beat them last year. This has got to be the game of the week, I would think. So, Bob, I mean, what is the, is this you got another mountain to climb if you're Reed City? You've got to be thinking that, how many times can they do this in a row, and do you think that they can come out on top one more time against Chippewa Hills?
Yeah, I talked to Reed City coach Monty Price earlier this week, and we've all thought that there's going to be a letdown, and Monty Price kind of said the reason why they haven't experienced one, and this is going to sound really odd, they don't practice well. They says that they're pretty low key. They're not very emotional, and when it comes to Friday night, they ratchet up that intensity. And he says that's why they've been able to stay at that high level instead of trying to do it through practice. And if they do that again Friday night, they're going to breeze right on through, I think, against Chippewa Hills.
And Brandon, by the way, Chippewa Hills is 4-1 in the CSAA right now and has a chance to win a share of the title if they win out. It's kind of a team that everybody's forgetting about. What does Chippewa Hills have to do to stay in this game and maybe pull off an upset?
Chippewa Hills needs to actually have a good offense that continues to drive down the field. Last week against Big Rapids, they had one offensive touchdown and that was it. They couldn't complete drives. They had some penalties called against them. What it comes down to is completing the drive, making the key plays that they need to make. They've got the defense to hang with Reed City, but Reed City has a really good offense, so it's going to be tough for Chip Hills.
Last game that we're looking at this week, a Saturday game, Morley-Stanwood at Lakeview. Morley-Stanwood continues to build off that loss to Reed City a couple weeks ago, but this is obviously one of the more talented teams in the league against a Lakeview team that's struggled most of the year. So, Bob, I got to ask you, is this a game that Morley-Stanwood has to worry about? They've got Central Montcalm in a couple weeks. Does Lakeview have any chance of keeping this thing close?
I think, if you had asked me that question a week ago, I said this is a blowout. But, Lakeview got a win last week against an improved Hesperia team who's been pretty stingy on defense. I think this is a Morley-Stanwood victory, but I don't think it's a slam dunk as we would have thought of, at the beginning of the season or even last week.
All right, Brandon, I got to ask you the same thing. Mohawks get a win, and if so, by how many?
I think the Mohawks win by at least 2 scores this week. Lakeview has improved, but I think the Mohawks are determined after that loss to Reed City earlier in the year that they're going to be going to the playoffs. They have that on their minds too, but they can't get too overly worried about that right now.
Well, thanks for joining us again for Pick'em. As always, you can visit www.bigrapidsnews.com to check out how we fared with our picks this week, or check out the weekend edition of the Pioneer.